Jamestown and Plymouth, their descendants grow across the landscape. As more and more people cross the Atlantic, thousands, tens of thousands, people with different backgrounds, with different reasons for being here. America becomes the place for everybody from everywhere. Rolling the dice, coming together to create 13 colonies.
From 1600 to 1700, many settlements were established. Quebec was the first permanent French settlement in America. It was established by Samuel de Champlain in 1604. The first permanent English settlement was Jamestown, which was founded by the Virginia Company in 1607. Jamestown almost fell due to disease and starvation. This was a period called the Starving Time, where many had died. John Smith saved Jamestown by making the people of the colony work for food. In 1610, Lord de la Warr took control of Jamestown and imposed a harsh military regime. An English colonist named John Rolfe, who was married to Pocahontas, saved Jamestown with the cultivation of tobacco. In 1620, Plymouth was founded by the Pilgrims. Then in 1630, John Winthrop led a Puritan migration of many colonists to Massachusetts Bay. The colony was founded by the Massachusetts Bay Company. Maryland was founded by Lord Baltimore in 1634. It was the first proprietary colony and the only Catholic colony. The main reason it was founded was to create a refuge for the Catholic. A man named Roger Williams was banished from Massachusetts Bay for challenging Puritan ideas. He then founded Rhode Island, where he established complete religious freedom. The colony was known for their independence. Pennsylvania was then founded by William Penn. It was a proprietary colony that was settled by the Quakers. The founding settlements all led to what we know today as America. In 1636, Connecticut was founded by Thomas Hooker and formed the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, which was another form of democracy. In 1638, Delaware was founded by Sweden, which was under English rule from 1664. The Carolinas were founded in 1663 by proprietary, and the North and South had given separate charters in the 18th century. In 1664, New York was founded by the Duke of York, which was under Dutch control as New Amsterdam from 1621 to 1664. In 1664, New Hampshire was founded by John Mason and was a royal charter in 1679. In 1664, New Jersey was founded by Berkeley and Carter and overshadowed by New York.
During the early 1500s in Europe, a man named John Calvin created Calvinism, where God was all-powerful and all-knowing, and humans were sinful and weak. Calvinism became the basis for many of European settlers in America, such as the Puritans or Pilgrims, as most people know them. England during the 1530s was a time of religious unrest for the English people. King Henry VIII was breaking his ties with the Roman Catholic Church and naming himself the head of the Church of England, just as Calvinistic ideals were spreading about. A group of Puritans in England wanted the church to become fully purified of Catholic religion and talk only of Christian ideals. In the early 1600s, the Puritans became increasingly annoyed at the snail-like process of purification that was taking place and agreed amongst themselves that only the visible saints be allowed into the Church of England. Because the saints in the dam had to share the same church, a group of Puritans known as Separatists broke away from the church entirely. King James I threatened the most famous group of Separatists out of England and into Holland. This group is known as the Pilgrims. Fearing Dutchification in Holland, they negotiated a deal with the Virginia Company and secured rights to settle in America under its jurisdiction. This led to the journey to the New World aboard the Mayflower. Departing in 1620 with 102 passengers, only one casualty and also one birth occurred en route during the 65-day journey. During this time period, one casualty was virtually unheard of. The Pilgrims, unlike common belief, did not make their initial landing on Plymouth Rock, but instead off of the rocky coastline of New England. Because this area was outside the settlement of Jamestown, they were considered squatters and did not have the rights to the land. They also did not have the rights to create a government, but before venturing off the boat, they created the Mayflower Compact, a simple agreement to form a crude government and to have majority rule all decisions. Life in the Pilgrims' colony was the same as Jamestown for the first harsh winter of 1620, with only 44 out of 102 persons surviving. The following autumn of 1621, however, was quite bountiful, with enough food from the harvests to have a feast, the first ever Thanksgiving. The vast difference between the two colonies was that the Pilgrims settled families, not individuals. In Jamestown, individuals settled because they were looking to make a profit for the mother country. In the colony of Plymouth, towns were created to accommodate for the number of families that made the journey, because the families were searching for the same thing, religious freedom. The Pilgrims' way of life was based around three economic strategies: fish, fur, and lumber. The beaver in the Bible were also prominent in their lives, the beaver meaning sustenance for the body and the Bible bringing sustenance for the soul. Although the colony of Plymouth never became very large, only totaling to 7,000 people in 1691, it was large both with moral beliefs and spiritual beliefs.
The Salem witch trials all started when Reverend Parris's daughter, Elizabeth, and his niece, Abigail Williams, started having fits, screaming, throwing things, and contorting themselves into unnatural positions. A doctor declared the spasms to be caused by the supernatural. Under pressure from the magistrates, Jonathan Corwin and John Hathorne, the girls blamed three women for afflicting them: Tituba, Parris's Caribbean slave; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly, impoverished woman. Good and Osborne claimed innocence, but Tituba confessed, saying the devil had made her sign his book, and that other women in the town were also working with him. The town soon lost control, searching for the other witches. Bridget Bishop, an older woman known for her gossipy habits and promiscuity, was the first to be hanged, to be followed by 18 more, 2 dogs killed, and 1 man, Giles Corey, pressed to death. In all, nearly 200 people were accused of practicing the devil's magic. The trials have been blamed on the fungus ergot, which may have contaminated the bread in the town. Other theories say it had nothing to do with the bread. Most of the accused witches were associated with Salem's prosperous merchant class. Their accusers came largely from the ranks of the poor agricultural hinterland, which showed the increasing stratification of the New England area and enforced the anxieties that religious tradition was growing steadily weaker. The Salem witch trials were part of a much greater trend in Europe, and Salem was not the only witch hunt in the New World. Salem was merely the worst because of the superstitions of the age and also the unsettled social conditions of the Massachusetts village. The witchcraft hysteria eventually ended in 1693 when the governor, alarmed by an accusation against his own wife and supported by more responsible people of the clergy, prohibited any further trials and pardoned those already convicted. 20 years later, a penitent Massachusetts legislature annulled the convictions of the witches and made reparations to their heirs. The Salem witch trials marked an all-time metaphor for the often dangerously irrational urge to find a scapegoat for social resentments. This can be seen later repeated in history with the McCarthy trials and the Red Scare after World War II. The Salem witch trials will be ever remembered in the United States and will always be seen as a dark spot in American history.
Beginning in the 1600s, colonists started bringing new religions to the New World from England, and certain colonies became homes to certain groups of religious people. Maryland was founded as a religious haven for Roman Catholics. It was founded by Lord Baltimore in 1634. During this time, England was persecuting Roman Catholics, and Lord Baltimore opened Maryland as a refuge for them. There they faced challenges with the Protestant backcountry planters. Lord Baltimore tried to fix these problems by allowing freedom of religion in Maryland, but that was not enough, and soon the Act of Toleration was created. This guaranteed toleration to all Christians, but less toleration than there had been for other religions. It allowed Maryland to become even more of a Catholic haven. North Carolina, founded in 1670, was compiled of the outcasts from Virginia. Since the two colonies border each other, and Virginia was solely made up of plantation gentry who belonged to the Church of England, all the religious dissenters traveled south to North Carolina. Many of them became squatters who did not legally have rights to the soil. Pennsylvania was created by William Penn in 1681 as a religious haven for Quakers. Quakers were a religious group who refused to support the Church of England, refused military service, and built meeting houses where they met without a paid clergy. In Rhode Island, everyone was granted complete religious freedom, even Quakers, Jews, and Catholics.
John Calvin, a religious leader from Geneva, started the religion Calvinism. He believed that God was all-knowing and from the beginning of creation knew who was going to hell or heaven. These going to heaven were called the elect, and people knew they were one of the elect when they went through a process called conversion. Conversion was believed to be an intense experience in which God revealed who was the elect, and once they were revealed, they were considered a visible saint. Calvinism was practiced by Puritans, Presbyterians, and Huguenots. Puritans believed that only visible saints should be able to get membership to the Church of England, but all of the king's subjects were actually able to. This allowed the visible saints to sit next to the damned. A group of Puritans who did not like this were called separatists, and they separated from the Church of England entirely. After they separated, they settled in Virginia. They were called Pilgrims, and many came over on the Mayflower. Their deal with the Virginia Company did not work out, and many became squatters. Non-separatist Puritans also came to America. They got a royal charter from the Massachusetts Bay Company and settled in Massachusetts. John Winthrop was the governor, and he believed he had a calling from God to make a city on a hill, a city everyone would look up to. The Puritans created the Congregational Church, where all adult males who belonged to the Puritan congregations could join. But the qualifications for church membership were still considered too strict, and years later the Halfway Covenant was formed. This lessened the restrictions made on church membership. Many of the Puritans are also considered to have started the fight for abolition of slavery way before it even became popular. Much of the Puritans' problems were with Quakers, Anne Hutchinson, and Roger Williams. Quakers were a separate religious group who disagreed with many of the beliefs of the Puritans. Hutchinson created antinomianism, a belief that holy life was not a sure sign of salvation and that if a person were truly saved, they do not need to follow the laws of God or man. This was heresy, and she was banished. Roger Williams was an extreme separatist, and he challenged the legality of the Bay Colony Charter.
The first colonists arrived in Jamestown in 1607. However, the Indians were in America long before that. It was inevitable that the two parties would face conflict. The first conflict that arose was in Jamestown in 1607. Colonist John Smith was kidnapped by Chief Powhatan. Matters were resolved fairly quickly when Powhatan's daughter, Pocahontas, saved Smith, displaying that Indians and colonists could be civil with each other. 3 years later, the same Powhatan organized a group of Indians in what became known as Powhatan's Confederacy. In 1614, in Jamestown, Lord de la Warr declared war on these Indians. This war was known as the First Anglo-Powhatan War. The war was ended by the marriage of Pocahontas to colonist John Rolfe in 1614. Many years had passed since the First Anglo-Powhatan War, but in 1644, the Second Anglo-Powhatan War broke out. The Indians attempted to gain their Virginian land back from the colonists, but failed. Their loss resulted in the banishing of the Chesapeake Indians from this area. 7 years prior to the Second Anglo-Powhatan War was the Pequot War in the Connecticut River Valley area. English settlers and the Indian allies attacked the Pequot land and tribes. The majority of the Pequot tribe died, leaving few survivors. This massacre of the Pequot tribe ended the Pequot War. King Philip's War began in 1675 when Massasoit, also known as King Philip, organized the Pan-Indian Alliance. This alliance attacked 52 New England towns and resulted in many deaths from both sides of the war. This war ended in 1676. Although there were numerous conflicts between the colonists and the Indians, there were also tribes and colonists who were friendly towards each other. The Wampanoag Indian, Squanto, helped the Pilgrims accommodate to their new lives in America. Wampanoag chieftain Massasoit signed a treaty with them in 1621, signifying what we know as Thanksgiving. Also, Pennsylvania, created by Quaker William Penn, adopted a policy of peaceful relations with the Indian tribes. This was something that almost all the other colonies did not do.